Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Working Families Caucus press conference for the day after Crossover Day. My name is Virgil Flood. I'm a state representative in the South Metro area. My district includes parts of Fayette and parts of Fulton County. I am a 10-year legislator and a 20-year business owner. For the last 20 years, I've run a consulting firm that's been successful in helping companies to identify talent in their respective organizations. In addition to that, I'm one of the co-chairs of the Working Families Caucus. The Working Families Caucus is a bipartisan legislative group open to all members of the Georgia General Assembly. The purpose of this caucus is to develop and promote legislation that invest in workers, invest in families, and invest in communities to help Georgians achieve the American dream of security, opportunity, prosperity, and equality. Today we want to talk about a couple of issues, specifically those things that matter most to working families in Georgia. You know, the number one priority for Georgia citizens is job creation. So that should be the number one priority for the Georgia General Assembly. Instead, we've reviewed the wreckage that occurred on Crossover Day last night, and we see a massive legislation that hurts working families and shreds the safety net. We see bills that undermine the core values of the American dream of rewarding work and playing by the rules. Let me give you just a couple of examples. Number one, SB320 cuts unemployment benefits to Georgians who lost their jobs through no fault of their own. Instead of placing the responsibility on the employers who are responsible for depleting the fund of $3 billion over 12 years. Number two, the refusal to debate good legislation that would help Georgia and by buying products that are made in America. Products that would help Georgia citizens regain their prosperity. Bills that would keep jobs here in Georgia rather than shifting money overseas. And number three, SB469, passed the Senate. It would unfairly and illegally undermine efforts by groups committed to helping working families by organizing to protest abuses by businesses in these very difficult times. So let's talk about the Buy American bill. With so many people still out of work through no fault of their own, it's a common sense piece of legislation that Georgia's tax dollars should be used on creating jobs right here at home, not on companies that export jobs overseas. Buy American policies have been in place and supported at the federal level by presidents from Ronald Reagan to President Obama. And they have proven to be exceptionally effective in state after state. Passing this bill would have created jobs in Georgia without costing taxpayers a single dime. Every manufacturing job in this country has a multiplier effect. And in fact, the studies have shown that for every manufacturing job, there's at least a third of another job created. There's a multiplier effect. That's why it's so important to keep American dollars right here in the United States. My legislation would simply provide an incentive for state purchasing agencies to buy products that are either made in Georgia or made in the United States. We need those manufacturing jobs right here in America, right here in Georgia. By the way, preferences for Buy American has proven to be supported by over 90% of all Americans, 94% of people who tend to vote Democrat, 89% of people who tend to vote Republican, and 88% of people who tend to vote Republican. It's independence, I'm sorry. It's common sense legislation that makes good sense for Georgia and for the United States. The legislation is simple, it's direct, it creates jobs without sacrificing quality, without sacrificing costs. It's good, common sense legislation that's good for Georgia and good for the United States. Next, I'd like to introduce to you someone who's very familiar with creating jobs, Mr. Joe McKenna from the American Fueling Systems. He's Vice President of Business Development, to talk about the impact of Buy American legislation on his company.
We're an alternative fueling corporation based out of Atlanta. We're currently building in developing the infrastructure for Atlanta, the state of Georgia, and then the Southeast for alternative fueling stations. Alternative fueling stations are exactly what they sound like, anything other than foreign oil, getting you off diesel, off of normal gasoline. Our fuels are compressed natural gas, liquid petroleum, biodiesel. These are all fuels that you're hearing a lot about whether you watch one network or the other, one side or the other of the aisle. Everyone knows this is important to the economy. And as a local business, we're excited to be developing right here in Atlanta, starting here with our core competency and then moving on forward to the rest of the nation eventually. As an alternative fueling company, I see a few values for the American people. First and foremost is green. Compressed natural gas and any other alternative fuel produces much less pollutants, much less particulate matter, and is a lot less greenhouse gases. Secondly, economy. There are a few ways to look at it for the economy. One, we're a Georgia business, so we're bringing business into Georgia, we're bringing consumption into Georgia, and dollars spent within Georgia. Secondly, we are giving people price cuts. The cost of alternative fuels are not only good for the environment, but they're also good for our wallet. Alternative fuels such as compressed natural gas is selling at $2.39 a gallon right now here in Atlanta. It's a lot cheaper than gasoline and a lot cheaper than diesel. By giving these rebates and these cost savings to consumers, as well as being an Atlanta-based business, we feel we're bringing to the bottom line of our people our home in Georgia. So once again, I'm Joseph McKenna with American Fueling Systems, an alternative fueling company, and we thank you for your time.
Unfortunately, we were not able to move very far on Buy American legislation. House Bill 816 passed out of the State Institutions and Properties Committee with a unanimous approval. Independents, Democrats, and Republicans voted unanimously to have House Bill 816, the Georgia Buy American Act, pass out of the committee without dissent. The bill was moved on to rules where it was stuck. Unfortunately, we will not be able to move that bill out of the committee this year, but we hope that we'll have another vehicle to get this very important legislation passed by the General Assembly in 2012. Next up, Senator Nan Orrock.
A few hours after the 30th day of the legislature closed down, and we see before us the wreckage. We don't see efforts to increase or grow jobs. We don't see efforts to build the economy. We don't see efforts to meet the #1 priority of Georgians, which is get this economy back on track and create jobs for Georgians. Instead, we see attacks on labor unions, attacks on our basic rights to assemble and protest, and in the passage of Senate Bill 469. And we see repeated attacks on those who fall on the downside of the socioeconomic ladder here in Georgia. It's the same old script of the 1% riding the backs of the 99%. We've got growing economic inequality in this state, and we have high unemployment rates that actually exceed the national average for the past 7 years. We need to rebuild Georgia's economy to work for everyone, not just the 1%. We're actually, by the legislation that's being passed in this session, we are promoting the shredding of the middle class, both the safety net and driving people out of the middle class. There's an unemployment insurance bill that the Senate crafted and passed. That bill, Senate Bill 447, shreds the safety net of an unemployment insurance system that's been in place across this country and across this state for more than half a century. In the worst economic downturn that we have seen, the fund is emptied out, and it's emptied out because business lobbied and got their way to not pay in to the fund. For 12 years, business had 4-year tax holiday and then suppressed rates that amounts to not paying adequately into the unemployment insurance fund. What is the solution that the business community and the legislative leadership has come up with? The solution is to take apart our unemployment system, to reduce the number of weeks that an unemployed worker who is out of a job through no fault of his or her own will now face a reduced number of weeks. Half a year has been the standard, the gold standard across the country, 26 weeks of unemployment insurance. 47 states have that. Georgia, sadly, if this bill passes and is signed into law, will have the worst, the weakest unemployment insurance system in the nation. That's the message that the legislative leadership sends to Georgians who are out of work. In terms of job creation, I had Senate Bill 320. Senate Bill 320 requires state contracts for services to be performed in the United States, not overseas. These are Georgia tax dollars contracting with private corporations, and they promptly take that money and go abroad and put it into the economy of another nation, and it's Georgia taxpayer dollars. Our food stamps program is managed that way, spending our tax dollars in another nation's economy. This bill would have stopped that. Again, in the committee, we got it out with a vote of only one opponent, but it's stuck in Senate rules. Last night, I put that bill as an amendment onto 492, and we passed that amendment with that language by 2 votes, 27-25. Let's hold on to that language when it goes into the House. I'm very fearful that we will see that language disappear. What the impact, of course, would be to take Georgia tax dollars and invest them in Georgia's economy and create jobs here at home for Georgians with our tax dollars. That's what we need to be doing. Buy American policies have been supported at the federal level by presidents from Ronald Reagan to Barack Obama. They've proven effective in state after state. This bill would help build jobs in Georgia without costing taxpayers a single dime over what is already being spent. And you know, over the past 3 years, this leadership here in Georgia has cut 10,000 public service jobs and 25% of the budget for higher education. So my amendment that passed last night on Senate Bill 492 would stop the massive offshoring of Georgia jobs. My amendment would stop the massive outshoring, and it also stops the massive offshoring. This amendment that was placed on the bill last night would stop the massive offshoring of Georgia jobs for call centers and other jobs that Georgians are ready to perform right here and right now. We then had insult added to injury last night when we saw Senate Bill 469, which would interfere with a working person's organization, a union's ability to collect dues, to build their membership, and to be a voice for dignity on the job and for decent pay and decent working conditions. The author presented the bill. The debate was shut down. The previous question was moved, and no one was allowed to speak on that bill. A bill that is unconstitutional on its face, a bill that will put the state of Georgia in court on lawsuits on constitutional issues, and a bill that sends a message far and wide that the basic right to assemble, free speech, picketing, redress of grievances, we will be shutting that down in Georgia with high fines and very, very, very punitive language in that bill. So that's the package that we see here in Georgia. Failure to pass bills that would create jobs, blocking bills that would spend our tax dollars here in our economy, and at the same time shredding the safety net of the unemployment insurance system in the worst economy that we've ever seen, and benefiting the companies that should be paying into that unemployment insurance fund. It's a stark, clear record. We urge Georgians to wake up. Take a look at what's happening down here under the Gold Dome. It ain't pretty, and it's not going to help middle class and working families. So we're sounding an alert and an alarm. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I am Pamela Rochelle, the State Director for AARP Georgia, and I am here today to stand with others who believe that years of favorable treatment of Georgia's employers should not be paid for on the backs of those who can least afford it. AARP represents over 1 million Georgians 50 plus. Like workers in other age groups, workers aged 50 and over have been hurt by the nation's long economic downturn, with many becoming unemployed through no fault of their own. What's more is that once they are unemployed, older workers continue and remain out of the workforce for longer than their younger counterparts. The current average duration of unemployment for them is 58.2 weeks, a staggering increase of 20.2 weeks. Contrast to the average duration of unemployment for those workers 50 plus, about 13.5 months, with the sharp reductions proposed in Senate Bill 447. If passed as proposed, Senate Bill 447 would provide unemployment benefits for no more than 20 weeks and as few as 12, just under 3 months. Georgia is already stingy with its support of unemployed workers, providing fewer weeks of help on average than any other state in the country. And yet we talk about reducing benefits. Georgia's businesses have enjoyed an unbroken string of unemployment, tax holidays, and tax breaks since 2000 for 12 years. As it reduces benefits to the unemployed 25 to 50%, Senate Bill 447 would continue providing a break to employers, requiring them to pay only half of what they could and should pay. Some say they should have paid this all along, as we are supposed to believe now that those same Georgians, these Georgia businesses, are suffering more than our unemployed workers. Are we supposed to believe that? We can do better, and we must do better. Please join AARP and others in urging the General Assembly to reject Senate Bill 447.
I'm Elizabeth Apley, and I'm speaking today on behalf of the AFL-CIO. I represent them as General Counsel at Legislative Counsel at the General Assembly. The AFL-CIO is going to continue to work for our top priorities. And our top priorities in 2012 remain job creation, the creation of good jobs that pay a fair wage and provide good benefits. We're going to work to protect the unemployment insurance safety net for workers who lost their jobs through no fault of their own. And we are going to work to eliminate bad bills that ban project labor agreements that provide a quality job in construction, like the one that Georgia Power sought when it hired and entered into a project labor agreement in building Plant Vogel. We're going to continue to stand up for the rights of the people in this state to organize, to bargain collectively, to protest, standing arm in arm with civil rights groups and with groups who protest landfills being built in their neighborhood, and with groups that stand up for the working men and women of this state and oppose bad legislation like SB 469. But we're not going to be sent-off message. Our message here today is our primary one, and that is we stand for Buy American legislation. We support a ban on offshoring that takes Georgia taxpayer dollars and sends them overseas when Georgians need jobs at home. And we stand vigorously against SB 447. It's unfair. It's unwise, and it fails to do what it purports to do. It does not return Georgia to solvency and protect the integrity of a program intended to help people have a lifeline, a small lifeline, until they receive that next job, until they find that next job. 500,000 Georgians are unemployed today. Only 1 out of 5 of those unemployed receive unemployment insurance, and all they receive on average is a check that replaces about 33% of their wages for only 3 months. It took, on average, Georgians 41.3 weeks to find a job in 2011. Our national average, as Senator Orrock pointed out, has exceeded the national rate for 7 years. We are on the wrong track. SB 447 has a devastating effect on Georgia's families. It would cut the maximum weeks that we can receive in unemployment insurance in Georgia from 26, which has been in place for over 50 years, to down to 12 weeks, a sliding scale from 12 to 20 weeks. But ultimately, it would cut benefits down to 12 weeks in Georgia, depending on where the unemployment level stood. This would be the lowest in the country. Georgia would have distinguished itself by cutting benefits to the lowest maximum number of weeks of any state in the country. 44 states still provide 26 weeks or more as their maximum. The effect on cutting the number of weeks would hurt, in the first year alone, 190,000 families who lost their jobs through no fault of their own. 80,000 families would lose $1,560. And I want you to keep that number in mind, because when we get to the other side of the equation, you're going to hear talk of pennies of increases in taxes on employers. The second thing the bill would do to working families is impose a waiting week. Now, keep in mind, we all read that Georgia is 50th in the country in terms of the financial security of our families. They have no savings. We have a higher rate of foreclosure. We have a higher rate of bank failure, and all the other factors that go into whether or not families in this state are financially secure. We're at rock bottom. We're also at rock bottom in terms of job creation, which is the key to securing financial security. And so what have they come up with as a proposal? Well, it now takes 2 to 3 weeks from the time you become unemployed and file a claim for unemployment insurance till you get that first check. They say, well, that's not quite long enough. We're going to impose a waiting week. And what that waiting week means is that everyone is going to suffer a delay in receiving their benefits, and half of the people receiving unemployment insurance today will lose a week of benefits. Keep in mind that Georgia already provides the lowest average duration of benefits in practice in any state in the country. Not because we put people back to work sooner. Obviously, after 7 years of an unemployment rate higher than the national average, we're not doing that. More than half of the people receiving benefits are exhausting, have not found a job before they go back to work. But Georgia has a little kicker on their formula, and it's more stringent and more punitive than any other state's formula, and it says you cannot receive more in benefits than 1/4 of the amount you earned in the prior year. And so Georgia ends up with a duration lower than any other state in the country. SB 447 would make that worse. Keep in mind that when you cut unemployment benefits, you are taking away dollars from your local economies and the ones that are hardest hit by unemployment, by high unemployment. Because when a person receives an unemployment check, that money is being spent. It's going right back into the economy, paying rent, paying for groceries, putting gas in the car so that those families can look for work and return to employment. So SB 447 is bad for business. It takes dollars out of the economy that have a 2-to-1, a doubling multiplier effect for every dollar spent on unemployment. We know there's a $2 impact for growth in the economy. Now, what SB 447 does is propose a small increase in the taxable wage base for Georgia. That's a small step in the right direction, because the taxable wage base of $8,500, the amount that employers are taxed on for unemployment insurance, has remained stagnant for 22 years. 22 years. And where they're finally proposing a very small increase, That small increase would generate $105 million next year. But it also proposes to make permanent a suppression of the tax surcharge that Senator Orrock referred to, following 4 years of a tax holiday that cost the state unemployment insurance system $1.3 billion. The law provided an automatic trigger because the trust fund balance was too low. A surcharge of 100% was to have gone into effect. Every year since then, that surcharge has been suppressed. It has not been allowed to go into effect. Slowly, in the last year or so, a small surcharge has been imposed. That surcharge is now at 50%. And this legislation proposes to suppress what should have been 100% surcharge in the past from ever going into effect. They would cap the surcharge at 50%. So increasing the surcharge, as SB 447 proposes, to 50% would generate no additional revenue for the state because that surcharge is already in place at 50%, and it does the dastardly deed of proposing to permanently cut those taxes in Georgia. You know, Georgia is already 48th in the country in the average tax rate for unemployment on the tax on the wages in this state. 48th in the country, and now we're proposing to go lower. You know, there's a better path forward to restore solvency. We do need to repay this $736 million that was borrowed because we ran out of money, and we ran out of money because of the $3 billion in tax holidays and tax cuts given to business since 2000. But SB 447 is the wrong option. What we need is to protect the unemployment benefits that are already ungenerous, that are already low relative to other states. We need to update our system to make it reasonable and make it fair and make it predictable. We need to avoid the risk of borrowing, and we need to change the system so we're not relying on a proposal to raise unemployment taxes when times are bad. And so we suggest by broadening the tax base, raise the taxable wage base not just to $9,500, but significantly higher in order to approximate the level that it served in 1990 as a portion of taxable wages, as a portion of total wages, I should say. You'd have to raise it to over $16,000. So you need to be looking at $13,500 as a beginning point for increasing the taxable wage base after 22 years of stagnation. Keep in mind that North Carolina's taxable wage base is $19,700 now. Mississippi's is $14,000. South Carolina's today is $12,000 and will increase to $14,000 in 2015 and beyond that, according to legislation that they've already passed. And West Virginia is $12,000. So Georgia at $8,500 is scraping the bottom of the barrel. We also have a tax system where 40% of employers are basically paying nothing into the system. They're paying $2 and change. Under SB 447, they'd pay another 70 cents or so, and that's per employee per year. So you're talking about cents on the dollar for 40% of Georgia employers and $1,560 a year for more than 80,000 Georgia families. So consider the fact that the burden in SB 447 is 65% on unemployed families and 45% on employers. And I appreciate your consideration. Thank you.